I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of your insights around what folks at different age groups or different persuasions are looking for in terms of their next step?
Well, to state the obvious, a lot of people are looking for jobs right now. I don't know, like maybe we just start with kind of entry level people coming out of school. But I'm curious if you're noticing this, but I'm noticing that people earlier in their career want to be in the office. There's a lot of like, I'm looking for culture, I'm looking for community, like that 3 day a week hybrid schedule seems to be the sweet spot. But I'm definitely hearing that a lot. And then I'm also hearing, I just want a really great boss and I want a really great mentor. I don't think people have necessarily defined that. Like that might be, college campuses telling people that they're supposed to think that. But those are the two things that I hear. Does that resonate with you?
It totally does. And especially as a parent of teens and having a lot of colleagues who have older kids, I'm hearing exactly that. And it's interesting. I don't know, like to do a deep cut on podcasts. I listen to the Pivot podcast all the time. I don't know if you do, but Scott Galloway, who's always there with Kara Swisher, who I'm such a Kara Swisher fangirl, but he's always talking about that, right? How like young people need to be in the workforce. Like that's how you get promoted. That's how you get recognized. That's how you meet mates. I don't know about you and your partner. My husband and I met through work, right? So, like, I think there is something
Yeah.
to that that I think is really important about that. And then, I guess what's interesting is, a lot of companies would say, okay, well, great, we're going to have return to the office policy and focus on all these things and mentoring and in-person events. But then I don't know, as my kids are a little older, but particularly when I was a mom of young kids, like there are a lot of people for whom the flexibility is also important too. So I guess as we think about that, like companies do need to think about how they're balancing needs of different individuals and maybe having flexible policies or different policies for different kinds of folks. And I'm curious what you're hearing from that 40 something, 30s, 40s, like people with younger kids and or just in that more transitional time of life.
Yeah. I could be projecting a little bit because it's like I am definitely somebody who drives carpool like every day from, 4 to whatever, 7 o'clock. But the flexibility really matters and it really helps. You hear a lot of people who they're in a leadership role, they've been there for a really long time, they're looking for their next move. Like one of the things they're solving for is flexibility. They just want, they definitely want to work 40, 50 hours a week, but they want the hours. It might be right when they first wake up and everybody else is sleeping. And they want to piece together the hours. Some of those hours will be 9 to 5 and they want to work with others. But, it's more like, let me get the work done on my own time kind of thing.
Yeah, we've always tried to solve for that. I know being a remote company for forever, and I'm one of those people, right? Like I left my nonprofit job when I had my second kid because I was sort of bored with my job and felt like unless I was going to be in the office 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, it was pretty clear to me I wasn't going to get promoted or get to do new things, right? And so it was a great call for me. But yeah, I definitely hear that. I mean, we've focused on that in our company where we have certain hours where everyone's expected to be online. And then beyond that, there's flexibility, right? So part of it's time zones shifting, and part of it's just being okay with like, yeah, if you've got to go pick up your kid, you got to get your work done. You and I are maybe also fortunate we're in a very deliverables based business. It's easy to know if you've accomplished your job or not, right? Which may not be true for everybody. But I think a lot of people are saying that, right? Like, hold me accountable to outcomes. I will be available for the team. I will be there when needed. But I also need flexibility at this stage of my life to move forward. And I think that if we're willing to give high flyers that flexibility, they usually will prove us right in that way.
What you just said reminded me of something else, which is like the time zone. Like so many jobs that we're hiring for right now are remote, right? But they'll be like remote within a specific time zone. And
Yeah.
part of me is, hey, I get it. But then part of me is like, well, why does it really matter? Like if you're not going to see each other, do you really need to be working every hour the same or are there just crossover hours? And does that open you up to, a more diverse pool? Does that make the salary stretch farther? All the things. Yeah, there's a lot of like, I need somebody in California. And I'm like, well, why? If you're not going to actually, meet, like, do they have to be in California? What are we trying to solve for there?
Yeah, like people that provide administrative support to me, my thing is always you got to work Pacific hours because that's what I do, but you can live wherever. I
Right.
lived abroad with my family for 6 months years ago and just worked the hours that I needed to, right? For the folks I was working with, we had someone actually in Italy for half of the year who worked East Coast hours from Italy, right? So, you can definitely figure that out. The final thing that I think is interesting to think about, and you brought this up to me, and you're exactly right, is there are those folks who are kind of in the third act of their career, but not ready to end their careers, right? And I think a lot of them are the folks that are getting impacted by changing funding at the government level or nonprofit level because they're expensive employees, right? Or they just are in roles that have been consolidated. And a lot, I don't know about you, but I find a lot of times I do fear they might face some discrimination in the market too, right? Where people are like, do I want to hire someone who's maybe going to retire, or do they have the energy or enthusiasm? I'm curious how you've solved for that with people. Like, how do you see that age group, and how do we help tell clients you should still think about them as really great employees, you know?
Yeah, no, it's tricky, and I do think age discrimination is real. Like people are more discriminated against race, class, or set. Like you're very trained to not do that, but for some reason the age stuff it comes out differently. Like I need somebody who's done this exact job before, but you're like, well, let's take that apart. Like, what are the skills that they need to have? Um, yeah, it's just tricky. I feel like I talk to a lot of people, I don't know, late 50s, early 60s. They're not maybe they're a little bit bored, or maybe they were affected by some downsizing, or layoffs or government funding. They're not ready to retire. They don't want to be a consultant because, right, there's too many consultants. They want to do something and be at an organization, and it's just hard to get their foot in the door.
Yeah. Or sometimes those folks are former CEOs or executive directors, and they'll come to me, and I'm sure to you, and say, I'm happy being a number two. I don't
Right,
need to be the boss anymore. I'm excited to be a number two, but no one believes them. So when we see them in a hiring process, someone will say, well, wait, they were the boss. Are they going to be okay? And this person's like, I'm really okay not being fully in charge
right,
anymore. But how do you help? How do we make sure we're open to that?
right,
Right. And
right.
with that person.
That just came up. We were like hiring for a finance person, and someone had been a CFO, but this was a level down, and they're like, I don't know. And you're like, well, wait, they're saying they want the job. You've got to trust people based on what they're saying. And I just like the exercises, like the more that it's like, let's just have people do exercises and look at them without names. And if the exercises looks good, then we can decide who to move forward. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fun topic and we can keep talking about it more. I know you have a 3 o'clock hard
Yeah,
stop.
no, totally. Definitely. I mean, and the final thing I wanted to circle back to what you said earlier about it's really about the skills and competencies for the role. I think in that, in your exercises point, like I just want to triple down on that. I think so often people get caught up in what's the archetype of the person I'm imagining for the job versus what are the actual skills and experiences that are necessary, and how are we getting at that? And to your point, believing people when they say they're ready or not ready for something. And I just want to really emphasize that. But yeah, it's great talking with you. We will have many of these chats, I'm sure, as we always do. But it's awesome. And thanks for making time. It's such a busy time of year.
Sweet. All right. Talk
Great.
soon. Okay. So fun.